Hey, I'm Steven. Let's talk about this whole DC Superman, Henry Cavill thing. Yeah, I'm a comic book nerd despite the radio thing, despite the voiceover stuff and all that other thing. I'm a comic book guy at heart. And how do you mess up what's potentially a $1 billion franchise? Well, ask Warner Brothers and talk about the DC movie universe, and we can probably figure that out. So, by now, the world was shocked and excited back in October when Henry Cavill said he was coming back as Superman, only to turn around last night and say that's not going to be the case at all. So let's dive into this. Let's see why and analyze the entire thing. So in 2008, the Marvel Cinematic Universe kicked off, and I was never really a fan of necessarily any of the Marvel characters per se. I mean, a few of them here and there, but I read a lot of X-Men comic books in college, watched the Spider-Man, the animated series in high school, but Batman was always my favorite character. And the Michael Keaton movies, Batman the animated series is like, I'd watch an episode of that any day because it's so damn good. And DC has a lot of things going for it. In fact, if you want to get technical, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all more of a household name than any of the Marvel characters, you could argue, other than maybe Spider-Man, maybe the Hulk. But certainly the characters that launched the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all had more popularity than any of them. But Marvel put a guy in place, they had a plan, and they did it right. Now, the first few movies weren't necessarily these billion-dollar adventures, but they built through a story. And it's funny, my friend Sean and I, who I wish in hindsight, I probably would have asked him to jump in on this video with me. We used to say that there are two things that we wanted to live long enough to see. We wanted to see how the Marvel franchise ended, and we wanted to see the end of the Star Wars thing. Now, considering how piss poor, and yes, I said piss poor, Rise of Skywalker was, that would have been a hell of a way to go out. Need better than that. But Endgame stuck the landing. Now, you can argue that Marvel's had some challenges since then because they reached such a pinnacle with Endgame that coming down and what follows that is a little more challenge than what it was when we got there. But DC has been filled with challenges over the last couple of years. And it started with Man of Steel. That's when they had the idea to reboot everything. Now, taking the Nolan Batman stuff out of it, the competition somehow started where they had to come up with their own way to be Marvel. And Henry Cavill with Superman was a pretty good start. There was a lot I liked about Man of Steel. I loved the beginning of it. I love the Krypton stuff. I love the fact that they essentially borrowed a comic book story where instead of following the traditional Superman story where he grows up, he lives in Smallville, he goes and becomes a news reporter, this comic book kind of took Superman around the world trying to figure out his powers and figure out who he was. And that's kind of what Man of Steel borrowed from a little bit. And I think it worked. Now, I'm going to spoil a almost 10-year-old movie now. The part at the end where he killed Zod, I wasn't necessarily a fan of. The wanton Zack Snyder destruction, I wasn't necessarily a fan of. But I liked a lot of it. Loved Henry Cavill. Thought he was the perfect Superman. He had the perfect look. There was a lot going for it. Wasn't crazy about Amy Adams as Lois Lane, and that continued through the next few movies that she was in. She just wouldn't have been my first choice. Taking nothing away from Amy Adams because she is a fabulous actor. She just didn't do it for me. Loved Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White. So there was a lot about Man of Steel when you dissect it that was really cool. They started a lot of different concepts and they all seemed to work. And Man of Steel made almost $300 million, which wasn't bad when you consider the first Marvel movies weren't pulling down $500 million every time they went to the box office. They were in that range, and Man of Steel was good enough that it should have merited a direct sequel, but instead they went a completely different direction. They got the Snyderverse created, and it started with Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. Now, if you said in the real world Batman and Superman were going to be on the screen in the same time and they were going to fight each other, that should have been $1 billion, right? You would think if Iron Man and all those movies can make $1 billion and they don't even have half the recognition that the name Batman and the name Superman has, it should make $1 billion, hands down. Not so much. $330 million. That's pretty much what it pulled in at the box office, which is kind of sad for a budget like that. And a lot of people, when it came out, didn't like the tone, myself as one of them, and Zack Snyder made a lot of missteps. Loved his casting as Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck is arguably my favorite Batman. Cavill was good. But they made the mistake again of going way too dark. The tone was too dark. Superman is not a dark, brooding character. Superman is the greatest of them all. He is the Boy Scout, so to speak. But I loved the fact that Snyder's Batman leapt off the comic book page. They got the costume right. Affleck looked phenomenal in it. I liked it. A lot of people argued that, Batman killed numerous times, and he did to an extent, but the look, the brutality, all that stuff with Batman, I thought was an A+, and he was arguably the best part of that movie. Now, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, not a bad casting. I'd only known her from the Fast and the Furious movies, so I didn't have much to judge, but I thought it was pretty good. And the biggest misstep that I think Snyder made, Jesse Eisenberg, who I love in Now You See Me and who I loved in The Social Network, so bad as Lex Luthor, so painfully bad as Lex Luthor. It just was awful from day one. So there were a few missteps there, and I think people didn't like it. They didn't like the tone, but they did kind of appreciate they established the characters. The other thing that I would think that went wrong with that movie is they tried to take three separate stories: The Dark Knight Returns, the death and rebirth of Superman, and the first time Superman and Batman meet, and throw it all together, throw in Wonder Woman, and throw in a bunch of characters that didn't belong there, and it just got convoluted and it was stupid. The other thing I don't understand is Gotham and Metropolis are neighbors. I think most of us would always agree that Gotham is Chicago and Metropolis is New York. It's just, from a directional standpoint, that's how far apart they would be. If Gotham and Metropolis were neighbors, Superman would be able to take care of business in both, so there wouldn't be necessarily the need for Batman. So just a lot of missteps there, but that led into the Snyderverse, where we were going to get our first taste of Justice League, which you had Affleck's Batman, Cavill's Superman, and Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman thrown in with a bunch of other heroes. Now, the Wonder Woman movie did pretty well. $412 million, almost $500 million. But even then, it didn't make $500 million. And I argue to this day, and you can fight me on it, the only reason Wonder Woman was really good, take nothing away from Gal Gadot and Chris Pine and Patty Jennings to an extent, it's a carbon copy of Captain America: First Avenger. Opens in modern times, closes in modern times, and in the beginning it's set during the World War. Same exact movie. So you felt like you'd seen it before, and it all worked. Again, only with a female character. So again, not bad, but you at least were introduced to her. And then they went right away and threw in a Justice League movie that was... It set up some interesting concepts. I will say that the Snyder version is far better than the Joss Whedon version, but at all the time that this is going on, you have this cast together. Momoa as Aquaman, yes and no. There are parts of it that I liked. There were parts of it that I didn't. I liked him more in his solo movie than I did in the Justice League version. Ezra Miller as the Flash, he was not the Barry Allen Flash that they cast him as, and that's another Snyder pick. So I think Snyder made a lot of missteps on the casting side of things. Dug Jeremy Irons' version of Alfred, and would have liked to have seen more J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon, but I think they nailed Commissioner Gordon in the Batman, and Gary Oldman did it well too. But anyway, I'm getting off the subject. So the Justice League movie was god-awful, and it put Warner Brothers in the hole, because you're going to put all these heroes on screen the first time. Like the Avengers, it should be massive, but it wasn't, and it was rushed. The story was awful. It made no sense. The CGI was bad. And even the good characters were wasted in the Whedon version that was kind of dissected. Now, the Snyderverse does a much better job with Batman, but the rest of it, it just didn't really necessarily flow, and I don't know. Just there were a lot of things wrong with it. So, once again, Justice League, $229 million. That's all it brought in. And the Warner Brothers guys, the executive side of it, released that movie so quickly so they could all get bonuses that year, and at the same time torpedoed a franchise. And the opening shot was Henry Cavill's messed up CGI face. For those who don't know, there was this big thing where he was in Mission Impossible, he was the villain, and he had a mustache, and they would not allow him to shave it during reshoots, so they CGI'd it. And the literal first shot of the movie is this poor Sci-Fi Channel CGI version of the mustache that did not work at all. Anyway, This movie gets bad. Suicide Squad is released, does about $325 million, but again, it was a garbage movie as well. There were some highlights. Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn was pretty good. And then you had a guest appearance from Batman, which worked pretty well. I argue Jared Leto could have been a better Joker if he had better to work with, and Will Smith was solid as Deadshot. But overall, the movie was just convoluted and dumb at the end of the day. So they make a lot of missteps with all these characters, and then they start kind of trying to figure out new ways to do things. Aquaman, the first movie, was pretty good. It was pretty entertaining, and it was enough that you'd want to see that character again. I thought Momoa did a good job, but they kind of took it back more to a comic book look and a comic book route, and it kind of felt okay. But then Warner Brothers just started doing some really stupid things. They get rid of Snyder. They decide that this universe isn't going to work, so they make a Shazam movie, which is one of my favorite movies that they did. I liked it a lot, and they do a Superman appearance at the end, but you don't ever see his face. So it's Cavill's suit, but it's not his face, and it's cut out, so you can essentially recast him later. And the executives at Warner Brothers decided they didn't like Cavill as Superman because he wasn't making enough money, so it was up in the air what they were going to do with that, and they start making all these plans. Batman was going to be a solo movie with Ben Affleck. That gets canceled and doesn't work. And there's this campaign to release the Snyder Cut, which we finally see. Then there's a campaign to restore the Snyderverse. And The Flash is kind of hanging out there in limbo, which was supposed to reboot. But you've got its star, Ezra Miller, who has been in and out of jail and all these things against him. He's getting some bad press. You put a Joker movie out there, which was pretty good as a standalone Joker movie, but he doesn't fit in the universe because this Joker takes place in the 70s and 80s, so by the time he meets the Batman, what are they going to do? Stop him from knocking over a bingo hall because he's going to be 70 by the time they battle? So that doesn't work, so that doesn't fit in with anything. You make the Batman movie from last year with Pattinson, which was pretty good, but I still don't know if that Batman necessarily stands into the universe as a whole because it just didn't have that right kind of feel. So they start doing these multiverse things, and you make all these movies that kind of go nowhere. And now with Flash, you're going to reboot everything. And the going rumor was the old executives before the changing of the guard at Warner Brothers was going to get rid of the Flash altogether, had the Flash go back, use his power, and erase the fact that Superman was there and replace him with Supergirl, which is a galactically stupid idea, because if you can't make $500 million on a Superman movie, good luck with $500 million on a Supergirl movie. And if you think you can do that, then you were buying some high-grade Los Angeles cocaine and snorting it all, because there's no way that happens on any planet whatsoever. So you figure it out. Now, fast forward now, Warner Brothers is sold from AT&T. There's new ownership in charge, and you have Black Adam, who's been a passion project of The Rock's for 15 or so years. He comes out and says everything is going to change. The hierarchy of DC Universe is going to change. And Dwayne, no offense, The Rock, not to The Rock, but flew off at the mouth a little bit, is spending a lot of time trying to prove that Black Adam was a profitable movie when it wasn't, because again, it was kind of hosh-posh thrown together. Most people didn't know who Black Adam was, and rightfully so. He's Shazam's greatest threat, but doesn't make an appearance in the Shazam movie. Instead, The Rock convinces them to do a solo Black Adam movie, which again, you can't build a universe on characters you didn't know. The Marvel Universe didn't start, it started on Iron Man, but it didn't start on Iron Man. Iron Man worked, so they went, hey, let's do Captain America. Captain America worked, so they went, hey, let's do Thor. Hey, let's do Incredible Hulk. Let's do all these separate movies, and then by the time you combined them at once, you had enough of who these people were, and Black Adam just kind of is a second tier, third tier, fourth tier character that The Rock wanted to bring to the big screen. And again, I had fun with Black Adam. I liked it, but you kind of wasted some characters. Loved Hawkman. Hawkman was one of the best parts of the movie. So was Dr. Fate. But you threw all these characters in essentially for The Rock to beat up. And then in the end, spoiler for Black Adam, it premieres on HBO Max tomorrow if you want to watch it, you get Henry Cavill to come back as Superman and announce to the world that he's coming back as Superman, only to turn around yesterday and say that that's not the case. He posted a really heartfelt message on his Instagram because James Gunn, who is famous for Guardians of the Galaxy, is now in charge of DC with a guy named Peter Safran, and they are doing some different things and changing it up. So Black Adam, unfortunately, didn't move the bar enough. But what you have is you have this convoluted universe where you still have the Flash coming back with Michael Keaton as Batman down the road. You have another Aquaman in the pipe. You canceled Wonder Woman, which is probably the best move because 1984 was a pile of steaming garbage. And then you've got all these other Snyderverse stuff that you have to try to figure out what you're going to do. Now, part of us was hoping that maybe you keep Cavill and go in a different direction, because I think Cavill with the right script would be a fantastic Superman, but we're not going to see that happen because he's kind of passed the cape along to someone else. There's a rumor that Momoa, after this Aquaman outing, because it's already done, is going to be a different character altogether called Lobo. Some people might know who he is, others might not. And you've got all these other things that are going to probably die a quick death, like Titans on HBO Max. All these other things are going to go away, and they're going to start fresh, which I think is the only way to do it. You have to get the taste of these characters out of people's mouths and start over, because most people aren't going to know that it's a fresh reboot. They're just going to kind of try to figure out, oh, I've seen these people before. So starting fresh is not necessarily bad, and doing it the right way and building up. I don't think Gunn is going to do anything with the John Cena Peacemaker series because it's his baby and it kind of fits in that world. The problem you have is Peacemaker has interacted with some of these other characters, which makes it interesting. But I thought Gunn's Suicide Squad sequel was garbage too. I didn't like it. Was it better than the first one? Yeah. Would I call it a good movie? No. But he's now writing the new Superman, which is going to star someone other than Henry Cavill. So as much as The Rock wanted to fly off the mouth, that's not going to happen. I would be shocked if a Black Adam sequel happened, because it's just, I don't know where you go from there. What you could do, and just my humble opinion, you've got another Shazam movie coming out that looks pretty good. If it does close or better than the first one, then you make a third Shazam, because you've got kid actors cast in those roles, and every year that goes by they get older and start aging out of those roles, so you'd have to recast them anyway. So do a third Shazam, close out the Shazam trilogy, and maybe you bring Black Adam and Cavill back as Superman in that movie and pay off the cameo that you had with Cavill at the end of Black Adam and go from there. But I think starting fresh is probably the way to go, and doing it the right way. Build it over time. It took Marvel 10 years to get to Endgame, and it was worth it in the end. And this is all these characters are worth billions of dollars, and you should be able to do it right. But it's just been a convoluted mess from day one. So Cavill, class act. Hate to see him hang up the cape, but it's probably the right move in the long run. It's just going to be a disappointing pill for a lot of Superman fans to swallow in the long run. Bummed that Affleck will probably not be Batman anymore, because I liked him a lot in that role, and I think he was great at both sides of it. So we'll see what happens with everything else. But anyway, at the end of the day, Cavill is no longer Superman. James Gunn is going to reboot DC and start fresh. They both handled it classy. They didn't do texts to each other. They didn't find out they lost their jobs from anybody other than the guys in charge, which is how it should be. And super movies should be fun. So if any of you guys are watching this and want to put me in charge of your billion-dollar franchise, I would happily jump on board with that. But either way, thanks for watching this. Give me a like, give me a follow at the bottom, leave a comment if you have anything that I missed or you think should be added in. But needless to say, these characters should have netted Warner Brothers billions of dollars, and they didn't, because it was just one bad decision after another that kind of totally messed up what could have been a really good and really exciting thing, and now somebody else gets to rebuild it and hopefully build a really good, really excited thing. So thanks for watching. Have a great night, and